Four players have entered the transfer portal from Tennessee. What's this mean? And four other players got invited to the Reese's Senior Bowl. That, freshman breakout players, all that to look forward to here on a Thursday. Locked on Vols.
You are Locked on Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it. This is your Thursday edition of Locked on Vols, and I'm your host, Eric Kane. So glad that you guys have joined me here today for this episode of Locked on Vols. It is your team every day, a part of the Locked on Podcast Network. You can always find me on Twitter at _Kaner and at Locked on Vols. I'm your host here at Locked on Vols, and of course, I work over at VolQuest.com, the Tennessee affiliate of On3. So on today's program, as you probably saw throughout the news on Wednesday, it started in the morning and went towards the late afternoon. Tennessee had four players that have entered the transfer portal. The repercussions of that are those big losses, all that and more in segment one. Segment two, we're going to get into some stuff I'm doing over at VolQuest.com. I don't know if you've read it or not, but I'll give you a little teaser of what's over at VolQuest.com. We'll do offensive freshman breakout players of the year and then defensive breakout freshman players of the year in segment number three. That is your show today right here on Locked on Vols. Jimmy Holiday, wide receiver, kick returner. Jimmy Calloway, wide receiver. Len'Neth Whitehead, running back. And Justin Williams-Thomas, running back. Those players have announced that they plan to enter the transfer portal. Are those big losses for the University of Tennessee? I wouldn't say those are big losses. I like a little bit of each of their games. I think Jimmy Holiday is, of course, he was Tennessee's kick returner this past year. He was the one of the off returner for Vols last year. When they kicked away from Vols, they kicked it to Jimmy Holiday, and I thought he did a good job returning kicks last year. He wasn't given much opportunities to do that this year. But, I like Jimmy Holiday's game. He's really, really quick. He's a good athlete. He's fast. He was never really given a shot to be a wide receiver in this offense, so I think he did some things in spring practice and in fall camp. I think for Jimmy Holiday, you're just looking for an opportunity, right? Again, Speed never had a bad day, and you can't coach Speed, and he's got it. And I just think that he wants to go somewhere and try to, show out on the field. He ended this season with 6 receptions, 106 yards, and a touchdown. I believe he had a touchdown against, it was Ball State in the opener. That's right, where he had 4 receptions for 62 yards. But overall in his career, that was this year's stat line. He had no stats in 2020, although says he was listed for a run. He had 1 rush of 6 yards. That was his freshman year. In 2021, he only had 1 reception for 5 yards. So he's really not been a guy that utilized in this offense whatsoever. And again, I think it said something that in spring and in fall camp, really spring, you had Walker Merrill, Jimmy Holiday, Ramel Keaton, Jimmy Calloway, all those guys kind of auditioning. Not really Jimmy Calloway because he's an inside guy, but you had those guys kind of auditioning for an outside wide receiver spot. And Tennessee was still trying to work the portal the entire time, but, still went and got Brew McCoy. Brew McCoy slides in. He's your starting outside wide receiver from the get-go. And I also think it says something that, and this is a hat tip to Ramel Keaton, that when Cedric Tillman went down this year, it was initially I thought it was going to be kind of a, by committee, a rotation, maybe slide Jalen Hyatt out and play Squirrel White in the slot a little bit, but it was none of that. It was Ramel Keaton the entire time, and so Jimmy Holiday never really got a shot. So Jimmy Holiday announced he was first on Wednesday that his intentions of entering the transfer portal. Now remember, the transfer portal will open up for undergraduates on December the 5th. Jimmy Calloway, he is a junior, and even though you take summer classes and midterms and all that, I don't think that he qualifies as a graduate because he hadn't graduated yet. So there you go, Eric. That's it right there, buddy. So all of these guys, they're announcing they plan to enter the transfer portal. That they can't do that until December the 5th. That's my understanding. Jimmy Calloway's next. And man, if there's ever a guy that had all the potential in the world, they just never really put it together. Obviously, we remember him this year from swinging tons of punches and fighting in the Florida game. If my memory serves me correct, I could be wrong, but if my memory serves me correct, he didn't really start that fight, but boy, did he finish it. And of course, they always catch the second guy. You never want to go out like that. He had a touchdown catch against Pittsburgh a season ago. In 2020, he had 2 receptions for 20 yards. His stats were identical almost to this year, 20 yards on 2 receptions, along a 17. Last year, he got a little bit of playing time. If you remember in the Florida game, he had that crucial drop on fourth down, and that would kind of send him to the bench as well. He had 5 receptions, 84 yards, and that touchdown against Pittsburgh in 2021. But Jimmy Calloway never really got his opportunity. Well, I say that he never took advantage of his opportunity because he did get some run early last year and a little bit early this year. He just never really put it together. So Jimmy Calloway announced on Wednesday as well that he intends on entering the transfer portal. So with the wide receiver position, while we're here, Walker Merrill is a guy. Walker Merrill is a guy that came in last year, and he's an undergraduate. You still have, of course, Caleb Webb, who came in last year, Chaz Nimrod, who came in last year. I think the staff really, really likes Chaz Nimrod, and those are some of the wide receivers that are left in the room. And as far as guys coming in, you have Cam Seldon, who likely will, I don't know. I mean, he's going to be used. He's a wide receiver, but can also be used as a running back. So we'll have to see exactly what Tennessee wants to use with him there and kind of how they want to do that. And then, of course, you have Nate Spillman, who's in this class for 2023 as well. That's what you have coming in at the wide receiver position. And, of course, the transfer portal will always be an option. Moving on, 2 more guys that enter the transfer portal for Tennessee, both at the same position. Running back Len'Neth Whitehead. I always liked Len'Neth Whitehead. I always liked his projection down the line on what he could have been. I was one of many that was advocating for him to play linebacker before last season because, I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, look at him. He's 6'2", 220 pounds. And I know Josh Heupel wants a bigger running back in this offense, and he ended up using him a little bit last year. But Len'Neth Whitehead at a time where you had no linebackers whatsoever, and I know it's not as simple as saying, hey, you go play linebacker and let's just move you over and let's just run with it. But this is a little bit different. I mean, he was an all-state linebacker. He was a 4-star rated linebacker, if I'm not mistaken, at high school. He chose to come to Tennessee because Jeremy Pruitt was going to give him the opportunity to play running back. So anyway, he got some opportunity. He didn't play it all this year, had a preseason injury, of course, and that was right, I think, a day before camp started. But he didn't see the field at all this year. He was hurt. Last year, he did a couple of things. He had 32 attempts in 2021, 207 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaging 6.5 yards a pop. He was the SEC Freshman of the Week after the Missouri game, where he had 6 carries for 76 yards. And, he's always dealt with injuries. Came to Tennessee with an injury, dealt with a little bit of injury. I think it was turf toe. No, that was Jalen Wright. He dealt with some type of injury in 2021 and then, of course, missed the entire season this year. So Len'Neth Whitehead announced that he is going to enter the transfer portal. And then Justin Williams-Thomas. These last two, I will say, Justin Williams-Thomas and Len'Neth Whitehead, this coming from a report from On3's Matt Zenitz that they intend to enter the transfer portal. I have seen, at the time of this recording, I have seen Jimmy Holiday and Jimmy Calloway put out something on their own social media accounts. These last two were reports from Matt Zenitz that they intend to enter the transfer portal. The last one I'm going to discuss here is Justin Williams-Thomas. Man, he is a good kid. In covering the team, got to know him a little bit in the recruiting process. He was always so gracious with his time. Yes, sir. No, sir. And seeing him over on campus, we're over there for media availabilities and, to watch practice early in fall camp and all that stuff. We're on campus a lot. And we see these guys when they walk out of the facility and, some will have their hood ups and walk right by you. Others, like Justin Williams-Thomas, will come up and shake your hand. They remember who you are. They ask how you're doing, how's work, how's your family. That was like Justin Williams-Thomas. I like Justin Williams-Thomas a lot. He is a nice kid. He was raised the right way, and he's a good-looking back. He's listed here at 6 foot, about 210. I bet he's about 213, maybe 214. He's a good-looking guy, but he was just passed up. Yeah, he was an early enrollee. It wasn't coming to him as quick in the spring, which is natural. And then in fall camp, he actually got passed up by Dylan Sampson, who showed up in June, and I think that was a little telling as well. Justin Williams-Thomas ends his Tennessee career, if he does indeed go to the transfer portal, 11 carries, 37 yards, averaging 3.4 yards per pop. He had a career-high 5 rushing attempts against Akron for 22 yards. He ran the ball 3 times against UT Martin for 9 yards and 3 times in the opener against Ball State for 6 yards. The future is still bright, in my opinion, for Justin Williams-Thomas. I thought he was going to come in and he was going to be a big part of this offense. I really did. I was wrong. But still, he's so young. He's built the right way, and I think he's got a lot of intangibles. So I'm rooting for all these guys. I'm really rooting for Justin Williams-Thomas to go somewhere and ball out because I do think that he is capable of that. Those were the 4 guys who, or 2 of them actually announced. The other 2 reportedly, all these guys reportedly going to enter the transfer portal when that time comes on December the 5th. Four other guys got invites to the Reese's Senior Bowl. So Cedric Tillman, Hendon Hooker, Byron Young, and then Darnell Wright also got an invite to the Senior Bowl. Darnell Wright is still trying to make a decision on if he wants to return for a 6-year, or it would be his 5th year of eligibility here to Tennessee. So if he declines the Senior Bowl invite, that means he's probably coming back. If he accepts it, well, then he's going to the NFL and going to the NFL draft. Those were some news items for Tennessee on a Wednesday, and of course it's getting really, really busy here in the early off season. We'll find out what bowl game Tennessee's going to go to. We did that spill on Wednesday's show about, is it going to be the Orange Bowl? Well, maybe not so fast, because the Rose Bowl has claws and Ohio State don't want to go there, and yada yada yada. We'll see exactly where Tennessee is pushed, or if Tennessee ends up in Miami. That will be official come on Sunday. All right, so when we come back, let's talk freshmen. Who were some of those freshmen that got into the ball game, and who broke out both on offense and defense? That's coming up next here in segments 2 and 3 right here on Locked On Vols. Hey, BetOnline, it's your number one source for all your sports betting news, information, and analysis this season. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional sport out there, amateur league out there as well. From football to basketball to soccer to esports, they've got it all at betonline.net. Hey, it's Championship Saturday coming up. You got the SEC Championship with LSU and Georgia. You got the Pac-12 Championship. You got the Big 12 Championship, the Big 10 Championship, all ACC Championship. Championship Saturday for a reason, folks. There's lines, there's totals, there's odds, all that and more. It's over on BetOnline. Put some extra coin in your pocket for the Christmas season over at betonline.net. Also, if you love sports podcasts, you can check out some of those at BetOnline. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device. Learn about all the latest trends and all the action. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Welcome back in, guys. Your Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. I'm Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys for hanging out with me here today. I did forget to mention in the last segment there, I kind of said whenever we talked about the receivers who were planning on entering the transfer portal, and I went back and said, who's going to replace them? Well, in terms of running backs, Cam Seldon's another guy. Of course, he can play wide receiver and running back. Cam Seldon is in this class of 2023, so he could be an option at running back, as well as Tennessee's latest commitment in 3-star running back Khalifa Keith. He is a bigger bodied back that would essentially take the place of Len'Neth Whitehead. 6'2", about 215, 220 pounds, out of Birmingham, Alabama. So that's what Tennessee has coming in behind them. All right, so I'm doing a little work here this week, kind of looking back, doing some writing work over at VolQuest.com, and hope you guys will check out all of our work and support us over at VolQuest.com. It's your best Tennessee football coverage out there, all right? And I really enjoy the team that I work with over there. So I've been doing some looking back on the season and doing some articles. It's been really fun to write this week. And earlier this week, if you haven't read it already, I did Breakout Freshman of the Year for Tennessee, both offensively and defensively. I'm not going to give you the whole entire article because I want you to go read it, but I will give you kind of the highlights. We can discuss it a little bit here on Locked On Vols. So on offense, there's really not that many freshmen to choose from, right? I mean, you returned 2 starting wide receivers, and your third, was from the transfer, or you returned a starting wide receiver, another wide receiver that was on the team, and then you added another one from the transfer portal. You returned your top 2 tight ends, you returned 4 or 5 starting offensive linemen, the other one you got from the transfer portal, your quarterback, and you returned all your running backs. So really, there wasn't a whole lot to choose from on the offensive end. But 2 names do come to mind. Freshman running back Dylan Sampson and freshman wide receiver Squirrel White. For the sake of this argument, I chose Squirrel White as my freshman breakout candidate of the year because I felt like he played more important snaps. Now, Dylan Sampson's numbers look a whole lot better, right? I mean, Dylan Sampson finished the year with, let's see here, if I can find it somewhere. Dylan Sampson finished with 7 touchdowns. And he had a really, really good game against Vanderbilt to end the season. Let me pull these up right here. Sorry, guys. This is real time. Do you like that silence right there? It's really not good podcasting. Sorry, guys. Dylan Sampson had better numbers. He had 58 attempts on the season, 397 yards rushing, and 6 touchdowns. He had a really good game against Vanderbilt, 12 carries, 131 yards, and a touchdown. But I thought that, because Tennessee relied so heavily on Jabari Small and so heavily on Jalen Wright, that was the 1-2 punch, specifically in games of high caliber, like Georgia, Alabama. Dylan Sampson did come into that game against Florida's another one. Dylan Sampson did come into that game against LSU on the road, but because of a pass blocking mishap, you didn't see him. He got Hendon Hooker drilled and actually fumbled it. He picked up the fumble and almost ran for a first down. It was a heads up play by him, but he missed the block. And because of that mistake, you didn't see Dylan Sampson for a couple of weeks, really, to be completely honest with you. So I just thought you saw Squirrel more than you saw Dylan Sampson in this offense, and that's kind of why I chose him as the breakout player of the year offensively for Tennessee. Squirrel White, like Dylan Sampson, had a really good game against Vanderbilt. He led the team with targets with 9 in that football game. He finished with 4 receptions for 18 yards, so it looks a little pedestrian in that regard. But overall in the season, he had 21 receptions, 373 yards, and a touchdown. When Tennessee needed somebody to step up the last week of the season because Cedric Tillman and Brew McCoy didn't play, you moved Jalen Hyatt to the outside, and you put Squirrel White in the slot, and you went up and went. At South Carolina, when Tennessee was trailing by multiple scores, unfortunately, Tennessee went 4 wide receiver sets pretty much for 3 quarters, and Squirrel White, played about 45 snaps in that football game. If Tennessee would have deployed 4 wide receiver sets, Squirrel White would have been out there, the entire time. But Tennessee just doesn't do that because they have to have a tight end on the football field the entire time. So I thought Squirrel, you saw him in bigger moments. He played really well against UT Martin. I know that's not a big moment. He had over 122 yards and a touchdown. He had a good game against Missouri, 2 receptions, 64 yards. I mentioned the South Carolina game. I mentioned the Vanderbilt game. I just thought that, and he came in and played a lot more in some bigger games. He played a little bit against Alabama. He played on the road at LSU. But we're really just kind of splitting hairs here on who was better in terms of a freshman breakout. I picked Squirrel White, but of course, if you did Dylan Sampson, I wouldn't blame you whatsoever. But I mean, really, there was no other candidates, right? No freshman offensive lineman really played a big role whatsoever. You did not see a freshman tight end. And you saw Chaz Nimrod play a little bit, Caleb Webb a little bit wide receiver in some of those blowout wins, but that was pretty much it. And so, besides these 2 guys, you didn't have really anybody else to choose from. So I do think both these guys had big opportunities and big futures in this offense. I think Squirrel White's going to be a really nice player. What he showed me is he's not afraid. He won't back down. I mean, he is only 5'10", 160 pounds, right? He was 150 when he got on campus. And so but he's not afraid to run over the middle. He'll run around you. Of course, that's his strength, but he's not afraid to take a hit, and that was really good to see. And then Dylan Sampson, I just think that he is a pure runner. It was really good to see him kind of run through some guys against Vanderbilt in that last week of the season instead of just trying to run around them. So I'm excited to see both of these guys and what they can do in Tennessee's offense moving forward. I really am. What about some of those freshmen on defense? We got more to choose from, more to talk about a little bit on the defensive side of the football. I like this freshman class, and I like this freshman class coming in for Tennessee. I think Josh Heupel's done a nice job evaluating so far. We'll talk defensive freshmen when we return right here on Locked On Vols. We got a final segment left here of your Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. I am Eric Kane, so glad that you guys decided to hang out with me here today, and really do appreciate you guys. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please support the show on YouTube. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a positive review. If you're on Spotify, you have that end of the year wrap, and you want to share that Locked On Vols as your number 1 or number 2 or number 3 podcast listen, go ahead and tweet me at _Kaner and at Locked On Vols. All right, so we talked freshman breakout on offense in segment 2. Let's go to defense. Immediately, there's a whole lot more that we can kind of choose from because the defense is it's a rotational position. It's a rotational side of the football, rather. And Tennessee had a couple more players step up. Joshua Josephs, first name that comes to mind. James Pierce, another name that comes to mind. Tyree West, Elijah Herring. Those are some of those freshmen that you saw out there play a little bit this year. And my breakout star for Tennessee on this side of the football, it was James Pierce. Or excuse me, it was Joshua Josephs. It was James Pierce. So confident in my answer. It was Joshua Josephs. You heard a lot coming out of National Signing Day about the wins Tennessee got on National Signing Day for Tyree West and for James Pierce, and they were both big wins. I'm not diminishing that whatsoever. Those are big wins, and I like the projectiles for both these guys and Tennessee's defense moving forward. But you didn't hear a whole lot about Joshua Josephs, and he's a guy that committed, I want to say a couple months earlier, and he just continued to, lunch pail, hard hat, go to work, right? What I remember about Joshua Josephs coming out of high school is he also played in space as just an outside linebacker out there covering the number 2 receiver, covering the number 3 receiver, running with the verts. He's just an athlete. He was very much more polished early on than, say, a James Pierce or maybe a Tyree West. He was very polished. And that's what afforded him the opportunity to get on the field early on. He played some big-time snaps this season. He played 17 on the road at LSU, played 39 snaps in a win over Alabama, played 15 snaps on the road at Georgia, graded out at 66.2 per the Pro Football Focus grading scale on 214 snaps. He finished the year with 9 tackles, 2.5 TFLs, and a sack. He had 5 quarterback hurries. And this is all primarily going up against starting offensive linemen. I mean, Joshua Josephs rotated in there, especially in the Rabbits package, where you also saw a little bit of Tyree West this year. That is a pass rushing situational front. And you saw, at points in times, you saw Byron Young, Joshua Josephs, Roman Harrison, and say a Tyree West out there, or an Omari Thomas out there, or whatever, or a Byron Young out there, a Tyler Barron out there. But Joshua Joseph has some flexibility. And so that's why he's my pick. And he played a lot of big-time snaps against a lot of, big-time competition. Another guy that really stood out to me is Pierce. Pierce didn't play an awful lot, but when he did, he flashed. He finished the season primarily playing mop-up duty, but he had 2 sacks as well. But, man, if he can just add some weight and put it on that frame, I think he's got a big-time future in this Tennessee defense. Some things you just can't coach. He is super athletic. His get-off, he's got length on the edge as well. Again, very raw, very underdeveloped. We kind of talked about that coming into the season, but he did flash when he was out there, and I'm excited to see what a full offseason of training and that strength and conditioning staff and that weight room can do for him. Another guy was Tyree West. I think that he's going to be really, really good down the line. You saw him again in that Rabbits package. Maybe he can move over and play that 5 technique next year, along with Dominic Bailey, opposite of a Joshua Josephs on the other side, and outside from the interior of like an Amari Thomas and a DJ Terry, Bryson Eason in there. I think Tyree West, again, explosive, very quick. He's a little bit smaller, but he's super slimy, if you will. He was out there as well, and I think Tyree West finished the season with 2.5 sacks, I believe. Let's see here. Yeah, he finished the season with 2.5 sacks and 9 tackles. So they all about pretty much had the same amount of reps in terms of the stat line. But Tyree West was a guy that played a number of snaps as well. Not as many as Joshua Josephs, don't get me wrong, but still, a lot of guys that was out there for critical times in the game. And then you have another guy in Elijah Herring, and I'll end with him. Elijah Herring is a linebacker that nobody was talking about. He was the first commit for Josh Heupel back when Josh Heupel was hired at the end of, or in February is when Josh Heupel was hired. And I think Elijah Herring jumped in the boat on early April. And he was the first one. And at the time, it was just like, all right, you're getting Elijah Herring so you can get his little brother, who was the number 1 player in the state, and Caleb Herring to be committed next year. I mean, obviously Caleb Herring is a part of this 2023 class, and they're going to play together. But Elijah Herring, as he continued to work and develop, and he came back to Tennessee as a commit and came back, they really began to like him an awful lot. And over the spring, I thought that he had a really, really good spring and kind of learning and catching up with the speed of the game. Early in the season, when Juwan Mitchell was out, he really benefited from playing a little bit of linebacker. Like we're talking about Ball State and against Pittsburgh. Played more against Ball State, of course, early in that game than he did at Pittsburgh. But points in times when they brought 3 linebackers on the field, because remember, Tennessee plays a 4-2-5, only 2 linebackers in the middle. But on 3rd downs and 4th downs, when they played a 3 linebacker set, you saw Elijah Herring out there playing that 3rd linebacker, playing that strong side linebacker, and that was really good to see. I think that he will be probably not a starting linebacker next year because you will have Juwan Mitchell and Aaron Beasley back right now, but he's going to play a lot of football, that is for sure. Jeremy Banks won't be back. Solon Page won't be back. So you're going to see a lot of Elijah Herring. And years down the line, you're going to see a whole lot of Elijah Herring and Caleb Herring, on the Tennessee defense. So looking forward to seeing that. So, 2 other freshmen that stood out to me, but this is on special teams. I thought Caleb Perry and I thought Jordan Thomas, they were everywhere on special teams. They played like a fire out of a cannon. Man, they were lightning shoot out of the sky on kickoff, and Caleb Perry did some things on punt return team. He nearly blocked a punt against Kentucky as well. And Jordan Thomas, man, I mean, I wonder how many I can go look this up, but of the tackles Jordan Thomas had on the season, because he played just a little bit mop-up duty at safety, I bet he had like 10 tackles on kickoff team, because Tennessee kicked it off a ton as well. So shout out to Jordan Thomas and Caleb Perry on special teams. But the 4 on defense that I highlighted, Joshua Josephs, James Pierce, Tyree West, and Elijah Herring, my breakout player on defense for the freshman squad this year is Joshua Josephs, because, again, he played a whole lot of football, and he played some good football at times, really. I mean, just getting off the edge, forcing everything back inside, getting out to a jet sweep or something. I mean, he's athletic, and he's quick. And I think he's deserving of that. So we talked a lot of freshmen on this episode of Locked On Vols. Hey, if you agree with me, holler at me. If you don't, fill those comment sections up. Tweet at me. Who would your freshman breakout candidate be for offense and for defense? Go read the entire article over at VolQuest.com. It's up there. I published it a couple days ago. And continue to read all the work over at VolQuest.com. 4 players announced their intentions of entering the transfer portal. We'll see exactly what happens when December the 5th, whenever it becomes official for undergraduates to do so. Will there be more? We'll see. What other news could be coming? Opt-outs for the bowl game, guys turning pro. We'll find it. We'll cover it all right here on Locked On Vols. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. Now, make Locked On SEC your second listen, and Locked On Sports Today your third listen. All the news, big stories of the day around the SEC and the nation. That's on Locked On SEC and Locked On Sports Today. Guys, I appreciate it. We'll do it again tomorrow, same time, same place. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody.